Hello again. I want to talk about a few points in finish in this video that kind of merited its own video. You see, this idiot just talked about add-ons and how they're affecting the game and how the base UI is not doing enough to give players what they need out of the box, and they're having to install mods to give them the extra way to be able to play the game. But add-ons aren't the only problem with the game's lack of accessibility and approachability to new players or returning players in general. Another problem with the game is, as I was touched on briefly in this one and didn't get to, is the overflow of information, the overcomplication of the game that's occurred over its existence for nearly 20 years. You see, something that the game's design philosophy has been around the fact that it's always adding. And when a game's been around that long, there's a lot of stuff that's added up over the years. So when a new player logs in, or tries out the game for the first time, or a person returns after they've been gone for 5-10 years, they're looking at the game and they're like, what the hell am I doing? I don't know what's going on. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. And obviously the first problem, which I already discussed, was add-ons. You know, a person comes back and the first thing they gotta do is install a bunch of add-ons to play the game. That's the first problem. It shouldn't be that way. But that's not the only problem. The other problem is that the game has been doing this arms race with veteran players for years, and it's not just countering add-ons, it's countering player knowledge. You know, as players get better and better and better at the game gets harder and harder and harder, and more complicated, and that makes the game evolve for veteran players, but it's a design philosophy that alienates new players. I constantly see new players come into this game. I'll see them on Twitch, or I'll see them on YouTube trying it out for the first time in the last year. They have no idea where to start. It's too much. It's too much information. Take, for example, you start the game right now, and you're like, I'm gonna play a warrior. How do I play a warrior? So you Google it on the internet, and something like this comes up. And you have to learn all this stuff. You have to learn your best in slot gear sheet, you know, all kinds of tips, the right talents to do, but you need multiple talent builds because multiple content needs different talent builds. You need to figure out the consumables you use, the right macros and add-ons to install, which I've already discussed. And then you have to figure out your rotation, and then there's like the single target rotation, and then all the buttons and special weapons and items for that, and the set bonuses, and then it gets even more complicated. Like, you look at this, you have to execute your rotation perfectly in a dungeon just to do good damage, and if you don't, the veteran player is going to be like, learn to play, noob, or get the fuck out of here. And, you know, needless to say, this new player, the retention of new players is not going to be very good. They see all this, and they're going to go back to playing Fortnite and Valorant because all they need to know is two things: point and shoot. That's it. You know, those are the games that are going to attract new players because they don't have this skill cap to start the game. And how do you reel this in? Well, it's complicated. They tried to do it once. They did a huge culling, but then the veteran players got mad because they culled too much, which they probably did. They probably oversimplified it because, you know, Blizzard has this habit of, you know, what we need is here in the middle. Here's where we are. We're too far over here. Blizzard's like, okay, let's go over here. Oh, that's not right. Let's go back over here. Nope, let's go back right. All the way over here. They have a hard time finding the middle, and that's where they need to be. And right now, we're definitely not in the middle when it comes to approachability. You know, we're way over here when it comes to the complexity of the game. And this is just learning how to play your class. Now, here's the other problem. Let's see. This is one boss. in War Within, the final boss of the raid. One boss. This is a list of her mechanics. Still scrolling. Still scrolling. Still scrolling. Up here we go. Here's the bottom of it. What the fuck is this? When people want to learn to raid a boss, they have to memorize 30 mechanics? The hell fuck no they don't. This is why they install add-ons. So they don't have to memorize this shit. This is the problem I was talking about with add-ons in my other video. There is too much stuff going on. Now I know this is all isn't happening at the same time. It's multi-tiered, you know, it's phase 1, intermission 1, phase 2, you know, intermission 2, phase 3. But it's like every phase has to have different abilities or rehashes of previous abilities. And it's obnoxious. It's too much. It's this bloat is the arms race that has caused the add-ons to get out of control. Beyond the fact that, like, the base UI is lacking. This is the other problem. And they say they did this because they're countering add-ons. And it's like, I get that to an extent, but you don't need to do this to counter add-ons. You can make a boss harder without doing this. Like, I'm gonna go to a perfect example. Let's go to... Gosh. Shadowlands. Castle Nathria. Sludge Fist. Now this has far less going on. Obviously, sub-mechanics make it look a little bigger than it is. Kind of like the other boss. I was a little unfair on the other boss, too. Some of those were sub-mechanics, but still. This boss fundamentally had, like, a handful of mechanics, but was still a very challenging boss. He didn't need to have a scroll bar that went down 5 pages to be difficult. All he needed to be was tuned properly and make the mechanics he had interesting. This can still fight add-ons, you know, without looking like this. And just for fairness sake, I will collapse this down, and it's probably easier to do that in-game because this doesn't support collapsing it down. You know, the in-game journal, War Within, raids, the final boss. Now here's the overview, you know, and mechanics, and here it is all collapsed down, just so you could, I'll collapse it all the way down, just so you can kind of see. It scrolls a lot better that way, but still, it's like, these mechanics in phase 1, each mechanic usually has a bunch of sub-mechanics, or like, things you have to do. Like this turns into this, which is why when you start expanding it out, you realize how complicated it really is. This leads to Acid Splash, Feast leads to, well, just Feast. Then this leads to a few of those. And each of these adds have mechanics of their own, which then it gets a little complicated because now you're starting to see why it scrolls so far. And then phase 3, it's like, these are completely different mechanics than phase 1. So they were like, let's make this one boss 3 boss fights in one, is effectively what they do. They have this habit of like, phase 1 needs to be different, phase 2 needs to be different, phase 3 needs to be different. It's like, it's the end boss, it needs to be epic. This doesn't make it epic, this just makes people install weak R packs. That's what this does. Like, you can have epic and cool without all this. You know what else was epic? Elgalan the Observer. You know how many mechanics he had? Like 5. In fact, let me go look him up. Let's see, let's go back to Wrath. Ulduar. Oh, right, the journal doesn't give you the... Well, you know what? Something that will do. Let's see. Raids. Wrath. Uldor. Elgalan the Observer. Big Bang, Black Hole, Phase Punch, Cosmic Smash. 4 mechanics. Epic boss fight. Still a very hard boss. You only need 4 mechanics to be a very hard boss. Yogg had a few more mechanics, but still, it was not super crazy. Now let's go look at something else I wanted to talk about. Something that's not in the counter journal. Again, I had DBM ready for this. Let's look at current Mythic Plus Season 4 in retail. Brackenhide Hollow Trash. All these abilities are just the notable trash abilities. That's not even all the abilities. These are just the notable ones. Look how much stuff you have to know and understand just to clear trash in this dungeon. You see, these aren't even boss mechanics. These are trash mobs. All these mechanics. When a new player goes into Mythic Plus, they are overwhelmed with this. There's so much going on. You pull one pack of mobs. There's frontals, there's ground effects, there's interrupts, there's debuffs going out where you gotta spread. All this crap is happening at once, and a new player is so overwhelmed by it that it's no wonder they're installing add-ons to handle it. It's like, even when you prove the base UI with all the suggestions from my previous video, that alone is not going to combat the problem of this bloat. Here's the next dungeon. Same thing. It's not like it's the same mechanics from this dungeon. Oh, no. You need to memorize, like, 20, 30 mechanics per dungeon if you want to run without mods. Or you just, install DBM or bigwigs or weak auras. Because who wants to memorize all this? It's like Blizzard makes it easier either. Half these mechanics, they have flavor spell names. It's DBM that translates it into English. Piercing Murrow. What does that mean? Well, DBM translates it into taunt, or defensive, or shockwave, or interrupt. It translates it to English. Because this isn't English. It is, but it isn't. And this is the real problem with retail WoW. And this is why, even when new players start the game, you know what I tell them? When they ask me, where should I start? I tell them to go to Classic. Because it's better than when they learn the game where it was in a simpler state. Leveling is harder in Classic, sure. But understanding the fundamentals of a game and approachability of that game is way, way easier. The rotations are simpler. Heck, even Season of Discovery with all the runes and extra stuff they added in. I still argue that's more easy to understand than mechanics. You know why I play a Prot Warrior? Because the DPS rotations are too annoying for me. I'd rather just hold aggro on the boss, stay alive, and manage a more basic rotation. But even as a Prot Warrior, when I look at my skills here, there's bait skills in here. You're a Prot Warrior? You don't use this. You don't use this. In fact, when they unpruned, they did no favors, but unpruning abilities we shouldn't use. These should never have been enabled for Prot Warriors. It's just a bait. A new player is going to put this on his action bar. In fact, I saw someone playing a warrior recently. They were a new player that was just trying out the game for the first time. They were mashing Whirlwind. They were running around prashing Whirlwind because it sounded cool. It was like a low DPS build, let me tell you, because they were pressing Whirlwind on single target, they were pressing Whirlwind AoE, and they weren't using any of the right abilities, because it's like, I'm just going to use this ability because it hits everything. Because, new player logic, they don't know there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and the game's not really telling them that. It's just saying, here's a bunch of spells, have at it. And not every new player is going to go to Wowhead and look at something like this to figure out how to play the game. So how do you fix this? I think there was a tweet from Holly Longdale recently where someone tweeted at her, there's way too many buttons. And she responded to that tweet saying, like, we're aware of that and we're kind of looking at it. And this was well before War Within Alpha started. And I was hoping War Within Alpha would do something about it. It hasn't. It's pretty much the same. If anything, they added more. You know why I chose Mountain Thane? Because this adds another button to push. And when this game goes live, this could be Sim 100 times better than this. I'm still going to play this. Because this adds no new buttons. This adds a new ability called Demolish. I don't want another button. I want less buttons. I'm playing this, and I don't give a damn what the Sims say. Because this just augments skills I already have. And that's all there is to it. In fact, I almost always go for the passive talents. Even before the skill tree revamp, like last expansion when we had like the talent system, I looked in every row, and whatever the passive was, that's what I picked. Because I don't want more buttons. It's bad enough I have to have fancy macros just to handle this, or even a charge macro that switches between charge and intervene based on, you know, hostile or friendly target. You know, I'm trying to cool in buttons as much as possible. I don't want more. Now, obviously, this is alpha. My UI is not going to set up as thoroughly as retail is, so forgive it for not being perfect, but, you know, it is what it is. But this and this and this reel it in. Retail has gotten overcomplicated, and yes, you have a lot of veteran players who need difficulty. But I promise you, you can have difficulty without this. And even, I'm not even looking at War Within. We can look at, Dragonflight. Let's see, Amir Drasul. Barak. Now, once you do the boss pull the boss a few times, it gets easier. It looks a lot less complicated than this, especially. But you have to consider how it looks to a new player, especially one who hasn't done bosses before. Like, one thing about us veteran players, most of the boss mechanics we see will be like, oh, it's like that other boss we did in Mist of Pandaria, or Warlords of Draenor, or oh, I know how to handle this mechanic, I've seen this before. And that's how the designers will look at it too. It's like, they'll mix and match mechanics or reuse mechanics very often. So us veteran players, we're not as overwhelmed by it because we understand it. But growth in World of Warcraft has become so stagnant because of this. This is not approachable to new players. And the game needs to be approachable. And this has been a problem for years. And I think it's really ramped up with the introduction of Mythic Plus and even harder Mythic Raids. And how Blizzard can fix it? Well, I think one of the things is try to have less abilities per fight. Not every fight is like that. I did point out outliers, and I will admit that wholeheartedly. But the thing is, every raid has an outlier. So whether it's all bosses or not, it is all raids. And You can't just be like, well, you can sit this boss because this boss is the only one that's like this. It's like, we need to get players into this game and able to play the game and able to learn the game. Let's see, Emir Soul. Like, there's a sweet spot. Like, this is a good boss. In fact, most first bosses are good. And then, as it goes on, it gets worse. And council bosses are always outliers too, because they often feel like, well, it's multiple bosses, and they don't want the bosses to be like, well, each one of them has one mechanic. No, they're trying to flesh out the mechanics so they each have at least 3. I'd say this one's not that bad though, but there are council bosses that do feel bad, that feel like they're a little bloated. And one boss this expansion that definitely bothered me the most was Kurag, because he was like, well, first he's got these flame abilities, then he's got these frost abilities, then he's got these earth abilities, and then he's got these storm abilities. And in phase 2, he's got all these adds. Each of them have 3 to 5 abilities. And there's 4 add types. It's like, that's a lot of abilities. Doesn't need to be that way. I'd say each one of these adds could have had like 2 abilities at most. Probably could have zapped at least 1 ability from each of these empowerments. And I know some of them were copy and paste. Like, technically, you know, the tank ability at each location was 1 ability. But they should have really kept it that way. They could have like a general category and listed it. Oh, they do, never mind. So never mind, I was actually giving them too much benefit of the doubt. It is a general category in Sundering Strike. Tank ability isn't counted in all these, never mind. See, it has so many abilities, I didn't even remember that. This game is due for a culling. If it's not going to happen in War Within, it needs to happen by midnight. Or maybe even like a mid-patch in War Within. Cull class abilities. Cull raid encounter abilities. Make the game far more approachable. And I'll even go in to talk about consumables now, too. They brought way too many consumables back. I liked the game when it was just pop your flask, pop your food buff, ready to go. Now we got runes and mana oils back, and extra stuff to worry about. It's just, I don't want a bunch of consumables either, and raid buffs too. Honestly, get rid of raid buffs, or at least the vast majority of them. There's too many of them. And they only hurt small group content anyway, you know. I miss when we can go into a Mythic Plus that didn't feel bad. You were missing all your buffs because your 3 friends that were on that night just happened to be 3 of the same class. And it's like, if you just want to play with those 3 people, it shouldn't feel bad to be missing so many buffs. You know, cull raid buffs. Cull a lot of things. I want an expansion of culling. I want this axed. I want that axed. I want the game simplified down quite a bit. Because there's too much to know about your class, about encounters, consumables, just too much of everything. And that is the next problem that needs to be tackled beyond what I talked about in the add-on video. You want people to come and play this game, or return to this game? Don't overwhelm them when they turn on the game and look at it. When Chris Metzen got on the stage and says, come home, you know, to all the players that haven't played since Cataclysm or Wrath, they're not going to recognize the game when they turn it on and see how much they have to do, how much they have to know to play it. I mean, there's bloat everywhere. Even bags. We got a reagent bag. I don't have one on alpha, but We got a reagent bag to hold all our reagents. And you know what else we got with it? 10 times the reagents. So they're still cluttering our bags anyway. It's like bloat for the sake of bloat. It's like, well, since we gave you a 36 slot reagent bag, let's give reagents tiers. Let's have 3 tiers of every one reagent, on top of more extra reagents for like every profession. And it's like, on retail, my reagent bag is always full, and so was like one of my other bags. All the time, constantly. And I'm constantly looting stuff and deleting it. So much bloat. And like every facet of the game is bloated. You can almost not look anywhere and not see bloat. And it's just... World of Warcraft needs to go on a diet. That's what I'm saying. Put this game on a diet. Anyways, I don't want to repeat myself too much, you know. I pretty much covered what I needed to say in this video. So, I'm just going to end it there. And if I missed anything, well, just follow and subscribe and post it in the comments, and I'll catch it in the next video. But thanks for watching.